The West is divided by the Israeli-Palestinian crisis. Having done all the heavy lifting of making Judeo-Christianity the dominant worldview in the last 2 centuries, they are now confronted with the much ground lost to postmodernism, which classifies God with ancient myths and the Bible with other New York bestsellers. These 2 divergent worldviews are what is determining where citizens of the Western world draw the line with the conflict between the Palestinian Arabs and the Israelis. The most vocal being the postmodern netizens who are ready to have words with anyone supporting Israel over Palestine. So how did it all get here? Welcome to part 2 of Israel versus Palestine.
I want that, I need that, that's real, homie, I can't believe that.
This disputed strip of land was referred to as Israel and Judah long before the Assyrians and the Babylonians invaded. The Assyrians made a colony out of Israel in the period between 732 to 722 BC and resettled the people in Parsua, a Persian city they had colonized in present-day Iran. Judah fell to the Babylonians, who killed and sent the survivors into exile in present-day Iraq in the period of 597 BC.
Make them pay!
Another Arabian empire, the Persians, took the entire region and surprisingly allowed the resettling of the Jews back to their homeland. Cyrus, a Persian king, in 538 BC not only allowed for the Second Temple to be built in Jerusalem, but also funded it from his own coffers. The Greeks conquered the region in 330 BC and later on the Romans. In 70 AD, the Romans invaded Judea, torched the temple in Jerusalem, and the Jews who didn't escape were massacred. The Romans renamed the entire region from present-day Syria all the way down to Egypt, Palestine.
For the glory of Rome!
Now that's a millennium's worth of history.
But Israel has a right to defend itself when you have thousands of rockets flying into your territory. Thank you.
With the death tolls in the most recent Israeli-Palestinian clashes being disproportionately higher in Palestine, the historical legitimacy of Israel is increasingly becoming an irrelevant factor in this equation.
The President and many other figures this week stated that Israel has a right to self-defense, and this is a sentiment that is echoed across this body. But do Palestinians have a right to survive?
In this unfolding narrative, Israel automatically becomes the aggressor and the invader.
And the United States must acknowledge its role in the injustice and human rights violations of Palestinians. This is not about both sides. This is about an imbalance of power.
That is the position of the squad and the woke netizens. And these are very strong voices in the postmodern culture. To delegitimize the Jews, you would have to prove that the present-day Palestinians are an ancient people that have historically been in Israel. If they were a people, then why did they wait until the Roman conquest to get a Roman name? They should also contest every other territory that constituted Roman Palestine, including Syria, Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, and parts of Egypt. They should also explain why they were silent when Palestine was christened, becoming a center of Christianity, attracting pilgrims, monks, and scholars in the 300s, who revolted against the outrageous ongoing concurrent constructions of the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, the Chapel of Apostles, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem? The Jews. So why the obsession by the Arabs of taking over what has for the longest time belonged to Israel? A new religion was started by Muhammad in 613 AD to rival the influence of Christianity in the region. This encouraged another Arab invasion of Roman Palestine, looking to establish an Islamic paradise in the region. It is in this same century that they built the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount, right where the Babylonians and the Romans once destroyed a Jewish temple. Something to do with the Islamic tradition that this is where the divine prophet ascended into heaven. Fast forward, Palestine broke down into several Islamic Arab states in the region, as earlier mentioned. These states have taken on different names. Their territories are uncontested. Why? Because Palestine is a fictional word the Romans used for an entire region with names that they couldn't pronounce. But Israel's return from exile to their historical home, a region filled with towns bearing Hebraic names, is an upset? Of course. Israel is a disruption of the Islamic paradise in the region. That's it. There are foreign powers that don't care about all that. The Israelis do. The Arabs living in Palestine don't know the entirety of the history and are understandably distraught. The citizens of the West Bank are under a tyrannical president whose official term ended in 2009 but refuses to abdicate. Gaza revolted against Abbas and formed their own government, which often is at loggerheads with the West Bank. This sense of Israeli intrusion, Abbas's tyranny, and the internal political conflicts are all weighing down on the Palestinian civilians. They are caught between Israel's fight for existence and Palestine's internal political turmoil. But of course, Israel is the scapegoat. It is argued by world leaders and corporate media that Israel bears the moral burden of the social injustices in the course of the conflict with Palestine. It is the democracy and the superpower in the region after all. To understand why this is the foreign diplomatic position, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you can get notified as soon as we drop part 3 of the series Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I've been your host, Tweeps. The channel is Intrinsic Kenya. I'll see you in the next.
I want that, I need that, that's real homie, I can't believe that.